The Great Smoky Mountains do not care about your Father Day plans. They are an ancient, sprawling mass of limestone and rot that has watched civilizations rise and fall while remaining perfectly indifferent to the suffering of man. In June of 1969, the air in the park was like a wet wool blanket, heavy with the scent of damp earth and the sweet, cloying smell of blooming mountain laurel. People call it a park, but that is a lie we tell ourselves to feel safe behind our steering wheels and inside our nylon tents. It is a wilderness that breathes. And sometimes, it inhales. On that particular Saturday, the mountains were preparing to swallow something whole, and they chose a 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin as their offering. Spence Field sits high up on the Appalachian Trail, a wide, grassy bald that offers a deceptive sense of visibility. It is a place where the sky feels close enough to touch, but the ground beneath your feet is a treacherous maze of sinkholes and hidden drops. The Martin family had come here for years, a tradition of hiking and camping that was supposed to be a reprieve from the noise of the world. The sun was high and hot, beating down on the 3 generations of Martins as they rested in the tall grass. There was a sense of peace that only high altitudes can provide, a quiet so profound that it should have been a warning. But they were happy, oblivious to the fact that they were being watched from the dark perimeter of the woods, where the shadows never quite matched the trees. The boys decided to play a game, a simple, innocent prank to liven up the afternoon. They wanted to circle around the adults and jump out from the bushes, a childhood thrill of manufactured fear. Dennis was wearing a bright red shirt, a beacon of color against the endless, oppressive green of the forest floor. He was small for his age, but full of the kind of energy that only exists in the absence of worry. He split off from his older brother and the other boys, heading toward a thick clump of bushes on the edge of the field. His father, Bill, watched him go, a casual glance that would become a haunting, lifelong obsession. Dennis went behind that bush, and the world simply closed its mouth around him. The other boys made their move, jumping out with shouts and laughter that echoed across the clearing. The adults smiled, playing along with the surprise, but their eyes quickly drifted back to the bush where the youngest boy had gone. They waited for the red shirt to reappear, for the high-pitched giggle of a 6-year-old to join the chorus. 5 minutes passed in the heavy heat. Bill Martin stood up, his knees cracking in the silence, and called out his son's name. There was no answer, only the sound of a hawk circling high above and the rustle of the wind through the tall grass. He walked to the bush, expecting to find the boy crouching in the dirt, suppressed laughter shaking his small frame. He stepped around the foliage and found nothing. The earth was undisturbed. The grass was not bent. There was no sign that a human being had stood there only moments before. It was as if the boy had been lifted directly into the sky, or pulled down into the very marrow of the mountain. Within minutes, the casual concern turned into a frantic, chest-tightening panic. The family began to scream the boy name, their voices stripping the peace from the meadow and replacing it with raw terror. They fanned out, searching the immediate area, but the forest was thick and the terrain was a vertical nightmare. Then, the sky turned a bruised, sickly shade of purple. The mountains have a way of conjuring storms out of thin air, a meteorological violence that feels personal. A massive downpour began, a wall of water that turned the mountain trails into rushing rivers of mud and slate. The temperature plummeted, and the air grew thin and cold. The rain was not just a weather event, it was an erasure. It washed away any scent trails that a dog might have followed and turned the soft earth into a liquid mess that would hold no footprints. It was as if the park itself was trying to hide the evidence of what had just happened. Miles away, near a place called Sea Branch, another family was experiencing something they would never be able to explain. Harold Key and his family were hiking when they were startled by a sound that defied description. It was a scream, but it was not human. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated agony that tore through the mountain air. Key looked up toward the ridge and saw something moving through the thick laurel. It was a large, hairy figure, a man who looked like he had been living in the dirt for decades. The figure was bent over, carrying something heavy over its shoulder. It moved with a terrifying, animalistic agility, disappearing into the brush before Key could process what he was seeing. The authorities would later try to dismiss this sighting, suggesting it was just a local person, or perhaps a bear. But Harold Key knew what he saw. He saw something that did not belong in the 1900s. Something ancient and predatory that had claimed a prize in a bright red shirt. The search for Dennis Martin became the largest in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. 1,400 people descended on the area. A chaotic army of volunteers, park rangers, and law enforcement. They moved through the brush in lines, shoulder to shoulder. But the mountain is a master of hiding things in plain sight. Then the Green Berets arrived. They did not come in standard park vehicles. They arrived in unmarked trucks, heavily armed and wearing combat fatigues. They did not coordinate with the civilian searchers. They simply took over certain sectors of the park and cordoned them off with a chilling efficiency. Why would the military need special forces to find a 6-year-old boy? There are rumors that they weren't looking for a child at all. They were hunting something else. They were responding to reports of the wild men, the feral colonies that supposedly inhabit the deepest limestone caves of the Appalachians. These entities are part of the missing 411 pattern, the unspoken shadow that hangs over these cases. They are remnants of something old, something that has adapted to the dark and the cold. They move without sound, and they strike with a speed that leaves no room for a struggle. The search continued for weeks, even as the hope of finding Dennis alive evaporated in the summer heat. The FBI took over the case, interviewing the family repeatedly, looking for a culprit among the living. But they found nothing. No blood, no clothing, no bone. Specialized search dogs were brought in, the kind that can track a scent through days of rain. They would pick up a trail near the bush where Dennis disappeared, only to have it end abruptly in the middle of a trail. It was a recurring theme in missing 411 cases. A trail that leads to a literal dead end in the middle of nowhere. The Green Berets eventually packed up and left, as silent and mysterious as when they arrived. They issued no reports. They gave no press conferences. They simply vanished back into the bureaucracy of the government, leaving behind a family that was shattered and a mountain that was still hungry. Decades have passed since that Father Day weekend. The trees have grown taller, and the grass on Spence Field has been trodden by thousands of other hikers who have no idea they are walking on a grave without a body. Bill Martin spent the rest of his life looking for his son, a search that took him into the darkest corners of the park and the human soul. The case of Dennis Martin remains one of the most baffling entries in the missing 411 files. It has all the hallmarks: a young child, a sudden, impossible disappearance, a massive storm that follows the event, and the presence of high-level military personnel who seem to know more than they are saying. The Great Smoky Mountains are a place of breathtaking beauty, but that beauty is a mask. Beneath the green canopy and the rolling mist, there are things that do not have names. There are places where the air is different, and the rules of the world we know do not apply. Before we finish, we should look at the case of Trenny Lynn Gibson. In October of 1976, she was on a field trip in the same park, walking just a few feet behind her classmates on a well-worn trail. She turned a corner and was never seen again. A haunting echo of the same vacuum that claimed Dennis Martin. When you walk into the woods, you are entering a world that existed long before you and will exist long after you are gone. It is a world of predators and prey. And sometimes, the roles are not what they seem. Keep your children close. Stay on the trail. And never, ever look behind the bushes. The mountain is always watching. And it is always hungry. Every year, people go into these parks and they never come back out. We call them missing, but perhaps they are simply exactly where they were always meant to be, in the belly of the earth. I hope you found this deep dive into the missing 411 files unsettling. If you are planning a trip to the Smokies, bring a map, a radio, and a healthy dose of fear. The silence in the woods is never truly empty. It is just waiting for the right moment to speak. Until next time, keep your eyes on the tree line and your feet on the path. The world is much bigger and much stranger than you think. And remember, some secrets are meant to stay buried in the mountains.